need to go global. We need to think big. दुकानदारी का ही काम करना है हमें या विश्वव्यापी और इंटरनेशनल स्केल का भारत की पहचान बनानी. That, friends, is the choice before us.
You know, the government of India has been obsessed with the Make in India initiative, because of which today India is witnessing a manufacturing revolution like never before. In the 1990s, India embraced the IT revolution by selling its software services to the US. That is how billion-dollar companies like Infosys and Wipro were born. But now, a consumer revolution is picking up in India, where consumer brands from India are becoming global brands. And Ananth Narayanan built a 1,500 crore empire out of this opportunity. From McKinsey to being the CEO of Myntra, Ananth saw everything and built brand.me. People, this is 20 years of wisdom distilled into a masterclass on how to build an epic consumer brand in India and sell to the world.
We have never produced the Unilever. We have never produced Reckitt Benckiser. We have manufacturing capability. We have design capability. Now tech is a great equalizer. Why haven't we built a brand? I think there are three things that have got in the way. The first is
how to build operational excellence to scale to 100 crores.
Generally compete in the least competed space.
Let's pick perfume. Do you still feel there is a gap in the market?
I think it's a massive gap. India is actually an infant market on fragrance. And I felt like it was at least $1 billion opportunity, hopefully a $10 billion opportunity. I have a big belief that if you want to go from 100 crores to 1,000 crores, 25% of your marketing should be display advertising.
People don't buy what you sell, they buy why you sell it.
You have agents who are personal shoppers who are owned by the consumer. You have agents who are brands and they talk to one another, and that's how the transaction happens. I think this can be the next big Shopify, right?
Where are the biggest gaps in the consumer space of India, sir? What are the biggest mistakes that founders make and how to avoid them? Which are the 5 to 10 most important positions that a D2C founder must hire for first?
I'm making a bold statement here. I think half the D2C founders, in my mind, wouldn't know what their packaging costs yearly are. And the biggest thing you can do for success of your startup is to not.
But before we move on, let me introduce our partners of today's episode, which is Odoo. Let's be real, guys. Managing invoices is usually a nightmare. If you've ever run a business, you know that cash flow lives and dies on invoicing. One missed invoice, one late payment, and suddenly your entire month is upside down. Spreadsheets don't cut it. Emails get lost, and chasing payments is total chaos. That is where Odoo Invoicing helps you out. In just a few seconds, with Odoo Invoicing, you can create and send a professional invoice, choose your customer, add products or services, set billing terms, and email it instantly. Every conversation, note, and follow-up stays linked to that one invoice, so you never lose track. And payments can be done in the smoothest possible way, and your clients can pay online through Stripe, PayPal, Adyen, and more. And when you connect your bank, Odoo automatically updates payment statuses, whether it's paid or overdue, and that too with clear due dates. So you're always on top of your cash flow, and you can keep your business steadily running. And it doesn't stop there. Odoo helps you manage credit notes, integrate supplier invoices, and even customize your invoice layout with your VAT and company details already set up. And here's the best part. Your first app on Odoo, including invoicing, is free for life with unlimited hosting and support. So with Odoo Invoicing, you can create, send, and track invoices faster than ever. Try it today using the link below. Hi Ananth sir, welcome to the Indian Business Podcast.
Thank you.
Sir, I am very excited to have you because you are one of the most seasoned entrepreneurs in India. And your resume looks like the best resume in the country. You were the CEO of Myntra, co-founder of MedLife, and now you are building brand.me.
Yep.
And sir, headlines, when brand.me was called Mensa, that Mensa hit $1 billion in valuation in 6 months.
Yep.
Now, more than the valuation, it speaks about the trust that you command in the market. Otherwise, hitting a $1 billion valuation in 6 months is impossible. And that says a lot about you. And when I looked at your portfolio of brands, you have ventured into protein with MyFitness, into perfumes with Villain, and into clothing with Dennis Lingo. All these categories, in my mind, and to most newbies, look like a category which have been widely explored and saturated. And they're hyper competitive in nature also.
Yes.
But even then, you have entered these spaces.
Yes.
And that is why I'm extremely curious. Why? Because you've been the prime witness of the D2C revolution of India. And now the D2C revolution of India is 2 decades old. So after the boats and Mamaearths of India, people think maybe the boat has passed. But then we saw Super You.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to Kishore sir, he told me
Yeah.
that even today, there is a $1 billion opportunity in the D2C space of India.
Yes.
But I couldn't find time to ask him how.
Yeah.
Which is why we decided to have a conversation with you to try and understand where are these gaps
Yeah.
in the consumer space of India. If a newbie has to look at this gap
Yeah.
and address the white space, how to go about it, and how to build operational excellence to scale to 100 crores.
Yeah.
Because in the past 2 months, I've been having this conversation with a lot of these D2C founders, and what they tell me is that after we've hit PMF is when the real problem comes.
Yes.
We don't know how to handle operations. We don't know about tech.
Yeah.
Quick commerce looks like a lucrative opportunity, but then it burns us out.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah.
So through this podcast, if we are able to deliver value to those founders who might encounter problems
Yeah.
and can solve for them in advance, that'll be great. That's the agenda, sir.
Terrific.
So, sir, firstly, I want the audience to know about you. So, please tell us your story and how did you get to brand.me?
Firstly, by the way, thanks for having me. You just call me old without calling me old by saying seasoned. So I'm going to ignore that for a minute. But look, I started off, I think I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I spent almost 15 years in consulting. I was at McKinsey, where I did mostly product development, supply chain, operations type work around the world. So I lived in China for 3 years, which was very interesting because it was 2002 to 5, and all the Chinese tech companies were just taking off. I came back to India end of 2009 and left McKinsey as a senior partner to join Myntra as the CEO, right? And the reason I left, I think, is also, I want to emphasize it a little bit because where to play matters. I joined from being an automotive product development supply chain consultant to being a B2C e-commerce fashion CEO, right? And if you think about it, it doesn't seem like a logical choice, but the choices were made on two things, which I think are important for scale up that you're talking about. One, there's a large market, which is actually at an inflection point. So I felt like e-commerce was at an inflection point. This was in 2014. And I felt like fashion would take off because modern retail was still very small in India, right? So you felt like a very large category growing very fast. And the second, which most people don't talk about, is people. You have to like the people that you work with. You have only one life. So you have to really enjoy the people that you work with. And I met Sachin, Binny and Mukesh, and I liked all three of them. I still like all three of them. So, so I said, I'll take a bet. And it turned out to be one of the better things I've done because it was operational. So I did Myntra for about 4 years. Business really scaled. The Walmart sales sort of happened. Decided I would be more entrepreneurial. So I actually invested into a healthcare e-pharmacy company called MedLife. There were no external investors at that time. The two original founders, Prashant and Tushar, had put in most of the money, and then I was only the third investor. So I bought 10% of the company, which in hindsight seems like a ridiculously uncalculated move. But anyway, it turned out okay. We went through some very tough times, almost ran out of cash. COVID hit us, but we got quite lucky because COVID was a tailwind for the medicine delivery business. We eventually sold it to PharmEasy, which was the number one player at that time, and turned out to be a sort of good exit for all investors and so on. And then I decided I'll be a full entrepreneur, so I'll start something. And why start something? I felt, I'll go back to your original question, which is there a big opportunity in the consumer brand space? So that's the reason I started. I felt like Indian brands, I think, can go global. We have never produced a Unilever. We have never produced a Reckitt Benckiser. Why not? We have manufacturing capability, we have design capability. Now tech is a great equalizer, which I'll come to in a bit. So could we create global consumer brands from India was the opportunity, and I felt like it was at least $1 billion opportunity, hopefully a $10 billion opportunity in terms of what we can do. And I think there are still large niches that you can actually play in, which I'll come to. But so the reason I started was I felt like you could create an institution that lasted for the next 50, 100 years. And 20 years from now, I may not be involved, I may not be around, but can brand me, Mensa Brands, we renamed brand.me because I think it's brand, dot is for tech and me is the consumer, and it still looks like M, which is the Mensa M, and felt like there is an interesting opportunity to create the next new Unilever. I wouldn't say digital first, all of that. Saying what's the new modern version of creating a consumer brands company going global. So that's a little bit about me. So consulting to CEO to part entrepreneur to now I think fully there. I think we're still very early days. We're a 4-year-old company at this point, and I think we still have a long way to go. We're hoping to take this company public, and we want to be around for a very long period of time. But that's But that's my sort of short synopsis.
Got it. And sir, from what I've read,
Yeah.
you initially followed the Thrasio model, right?
Yeah.
Where you used to acquire brands and then you scaled up brands. That
Yes.
was the original plan, right?
It wasn't. So let me just, I think in India, there is generally an easy way to say X of Y, right? So what I mean by X of Y is, you've created the Amazon of India, therefore I'll create Flipkart, or, similar with Uber, Ola, etc., right?
Yeah.
So my thesis was not Thrasio. I had not even heard of Thrasio when I first started.
Oh.
My thesis actually was, if you look at Myntra built a very large private brand business, not label. HRX, Roadster were all big businesses, right? And they were built as real brands. And so the goal was, can you build a platform agnostic global consumer brand company? Okay, so that's how I started. What's different between us and an aggregator like Thrasio? So firstly, Thrasio played a little bit of the financial arbitrage game, and then they acquired 200 companies, 200 plus brands, right? Our goal was always more focused. We were only in two spaces from the very beginning. We were in lifestyle and we were in health and wellness, right? The health and wellness was originally called beauty and personal care, but I made it health and wellness as a tweak because as I was thinking about the brands, health and wellness is a space that can go on for a long period. So we were only in two spaces.
Okay.
Second, India has a manufacturing, design and sourcing advantage, right? So you can build from India with a real cost advantage. You can build for India and for the world. So I think that was different.
Can you explain that, sir?
So I'll give you an example. One of my brands is called Majestic Pure. Majestic Pure is the largest aromatherapy brand from India, and it's actually maybe number 2, number 3 in Amazon in the US. We're in Target.com, Walmart.com, everything now, right? We in India have always produced essential oils, massage oils, body oils. We are a very large manufacturer. We actually ship by the container in bulk. But we have never built a brand. And why? Why haven't we built a brand? I think there are 3 things that have got in the way. The first, I think is, 20 years ago, you could not understand a consumer around the world. It wasn't possible, right? Because you didn't have data. Now that's no longer the case. In a digital first world, you can understand consumers in any part of the world by looking at data. The second is you needed distribution as the differentiator. You needed a distributor locally in order to sell. Now in India, 120 rupees you can get to 20,000 pin codes. In the US, for $3-4 you can get to every pin code in the US. So it's very possible now to distribute. There's no problem, right? So that's the second big difference. The third, which I think is a little bit, we were chatting a little bit earlier, is ambition, right? I actually think, by the way, we don't think beyond India. I'm saying, why is it that I, who have all the capabilities, I can get capital? Why can't I build a Unilever? Why do I need to basically say, I will build only for this? So I think you need all these 3 things, and I think you can build a global consumer company. So that was the thesis. It wasn't Thrasio, right? Now, we did buy about 20 brands. We consolidated that down to about 10 brands. One of the lessons learned, see, I think no startup goes without a pivot, right? Every startup goes through pivots. So we bought 20 brands, and then we quickly realized in a year and a half, that you need focus in order to build large brands. And it takes exactly the same amount of effort, whether you're building a 50 crore brand, a 100 crore brand, or a 1,000 crore brand. So it's better to build 4 or 5,000 crore brands, which is what we've sort of pivoted, right? So we consolidated the 20 down to 10. Couple of businesses that didn't fit in with this thesis, we let go, right? And we've sort of focused, right? So we are not building a Thrasio. We are building a new modern version, an Indian version of Unilever. And I think that's a very exciting place to be, right? And I think that's what we want to try and build. And I think you can have global ambitions from India. It is one thing that, listeners can take away, right? We should have global ambitions.
Wonderful.
We should think globally and should be globally the best.
Where are the biggest gaps in the consumer space of India, sir?
2-3 things, right? My first thesis is generally compete in the least competed spaces. It's almost always better. So picking a niche is a much better way to build a brand because your unit economics are better. It allows you to invest back in brand building, etc., etc. I'll give you an example from one of our brands. MyFitness is our healthy snacking brand. The space in the market, in my mind, is there is a movement towards protein and health. But Indians genuinely want taste, right? In India, by the way, without taste, nothing sells. So we said, by the way, how can you be health ka tasty partner? That's the tagline. And I think there is a space there. And we picked peanut butter as a niche. Peanut butter is actually an emerging niche because Indians are becoming more health conscious. We have whatever, call it 30-35% vegetarian population which need a protein source. And people are working out. So the insight at some level was people who work out need a quick protein intake. And this is not the mother sort of spreading peanut butter on a sandwich and giving it to the child. It's actually, by the way, a gym goer taking 1 scoop of peanut butter and eating it. So the reason I'm telling you this is peanut butter may not seem like a large business, right? But if you take peanut butter as a niche category and you dominate it, we are at 22% market share. We're the largest player, right? And we did 2 innovations. One is we said we know our consumer audience well, which is it's a gym goer. Therefore, if you look at our peanut butter, there's no oil separation. The reason that's important is if you're spreading it, there's no problem with oil separation, right? When you open a peanut butter jar, you'll usually have some oil separation. Ours does not. And the reason that's important is the gym goer is not spreading it on bread. He's taking a spoon, taking a scoop and eating it.
Yeah.
And I think lack of oil separation makes it dramatically easier. It may seem small, right? But it's actually a big insight in order to basically say, I can dominate a space. Or I'll tell you, we were the first ones to launch a chocolate peanut butter. Why a chocolate peanut butter? Because most people are eating Nutella. Nutella or hazelnut spreads of all kinds, right? That's whatever, 45, 50% sugar. Can we create a healthy alternative which tastes good? Again, going back to the insight of health, but taste as well. So we created a chocolate peanut butter, which actually tastes very good, but has less than 10% sugar. So you need 1 or 2 consumer insights. You need to pick a niche space. Then if you want to say, how can I build this into a 1,000 crore brand, for example, right? In my mind, you shouldn't think 100. I think a brand in India is 1,000 crores, right? That's when you've arrived. I think 100 crores is the first milestone, but you should have a vision to get to 1,000 crore. This, by the way, is a 200, 250 crore type business. We think we can take it to 1,000 crores.
Okay.
Why do we think that? First, can we take it to other markets? Again, this ambition about being global. We launched the Middle East and it's starting to do really well in the Middle East, right? So how can you, and the reason that's interesting is, if you take the TAM of peanut butter alone in India, it's probably 1,200, 1,300 crores, right? Yeah, that's why we're 22 some percent of the market. But if you add the Middle East, you add another 2,000 crores, right? Suddenly the market, addressable market sort of triples, right? So how do you go in a niche space where you can dominate, but across the world? And then you can start to build a large brand, right? The other way to sort of we're expanding is, you know, if you think about your life as healthy snacking and your health ka tasty partner, and the name is MyFitness.
Yeah.
You know, going global is important because it changes the TAM that you can really go after. And I think if you have the right product and the right distribution, there is nothing preventing Indian consumer companies from going global, right? So, and then the third angle of expanding, right, where you start with a smaller TAM, dominate it and scale is, we're going from peanut butter, which is a protein, healthy snacking thing, to saying all of healthy snacking. So we've launched protein bars, right? We're launching whey. You know, so it's possible to expand with a strong brand presence in one category to adjacent categories. And each of these starts adding 500 crores, 1,000 crores to the TAM. And suddenly you have a 5,000, 7,000 crore market, out of which if you're 20%, you know, you're there, right? So that's a little bit of how we think about it. And I think MyFitness is a primary example of picking a niche, sort of saying I'll dominate it. I will have a structural advantage based on a couple of consumer insights, and then really take it global and sort of build the surrounding categories, right? And I think, so that's one example of a niche. I'll give you another example of a niche. One of our brands is called Party Props.
Party props.
Yeah, which you may have heard of, right? But Party Props is actually half the market of it. The tagline of the brand is something I love. It's make every celebration magical.
Okay.
Right? So we sell boxes of happiness. Okay. So you can have a 50th birthday party saying unicorn as a theme, or you can have a 50th day birthday party, you can have a Ganesh Chaturthi celebration. What we do is we curate a set of balloons, streamers, paper products, you know, names, etc. that come in a nice box for you to self-decorate and DIY and sort of celebrate. Why is this an interesting space? India's GDP is going up, global GDP is going up. It is actually celebrations and sort of marking occasions is something that's becoming bigger. It is an unorganized space. Lots and lots of small players, right? Every city, I'm sure Bombay has it, but every city has a street where you can go buy balloon streamers, etc., right? But nobody's ever built a brand out of it. Why not, right? Why not? Usually is because it's an operational problem. This is a very wide SKU assortment. Usually you have between 2,000 and 5,000 SKUs, right? Very hard to manage. But it's an 80% gross margin business, right? Because whether you sell for 600, 599, 499 or 699, when you want birthday celebrations for your child or for yourself, what do you care about? You care about quality, you care about design, and you care about on-time delivery, right? You don't care about the price. I mean, whether it's 100, 200, 300 rupees, or we sell this in the US as well, whether it's $1, $2, $3 this way, that way, nobody cares. So it's an interesting niche, right? Again, this has now become a large business for us because there is an opportunity to actually become a 50% market share player, right? And then it's very similar to, you need a lot of tech to manage it. So a small player cannot sort of build all the tech because if you have 3,000 SKUs, you'll run 50,000 campaigns. To run 50,000 campaigns, you need a tech platform in ads, right? So there are niches that you can pick where people are not competing and build global businesses from there. And I think it's a massive opportunity. I think Indian consumer brands should go global and Indian consumer brands should say, what is the niche I want to play? So MyFitness is an example of that. Party Props is an example of that, where you can sort of start at a niche, sort of build around, surround around it, and then go global and start to dominate globally.
So this is such an interesting insight because when somebody thinks of building a 1,000 crore consumer brand, they would never think of party props,
Yes.
right? And like you mentioned about peanut butter, all of them are built on consumer insights.
Yep.
How do you get these consumer insights?
Yeah. So I think there's an art and a science too, how you sort of do this. Firstly, there is now a lot of data and very, very few people actually spend real time on the data, right? One of the things we constantly do, and we'll talk a little bit more about technology in a bit, but what we've done is we constantly keep scanning, right? It can be as simple as what's called an SQP report, right? Search Query Performance Report, which is a classic Amazon report that comes out. You can basically look for different categories. And one of the things I look for is which search terms have more than a 25% month-on-month growth. It's very simple, right? I mean, if something is growing 25% month-on-month, there is something happening. So I look at once a month, what are all the things that are growing at 25%? Some of them may be brands, some of them may not be brands, but you keep looking at it, right? And I think then you keep looking for ideas. So that's one, which is a little bit more of the logical piece, right? The second is I look for spaces which have less competition, right? Even, we were talking about which spaces is brand me in, right? And I said health and wellness, not BPC. And the reason I picked health and wellness is Majestic Pure. You could say it's BPC, but it's actually a health and wellness. It's an aromatherapy wellness brand, right? And there is not that much competition, right? So pick areas, so you keep looking for places which have some secular trend, but don't have too much competition. So that's the second sort of thing to look for. The third, which I think is the art part of it, is you have to find someone passionate to actually, we have, call it 10 brands, right? And we have 10 brand managers. I think there's an art to finding the right brand manager.
Okay.
And it is probably the most important decision that you make, right? There's capital allocation and people allocation. I think these are the two things, right? If I look at a portfolio of businesses that we actually run, apart from all the operating. Our profile is somebody who's actually started a business, right? May have worked, may not have worked. Most likely it hasn't worked. And then they go off into a larger company and sort of have scenes of scale and are now ready to come back to building, right? That profile works well, right? And you need somebody who has a passion, right? I have one of our smaller brands is a brand called Trust Basket, which is a gardening brand, which is part of the lifestyle business. But you need someone who likes gardening, right? Otherwise, it's very hard actually to be mechanical about it. See, there are two kinds of brand managers. There are category managers and there are brand managers, right? You need brand managers if you're building a brand, and which means you need passion, right? So, for example, in MyFitness, we have Meghna who runs our business and Ravi who runs our business, both of who are very passionate about fitness, right? And very passionate about what they eat and how do we make sure that it's actually good and healthy, right? You need that, right? We have actually, for our party celebration business, we have a team who's very passionate. So you go to the office, right? The corner of party props is always decorated.
They're always partying.
They're always partying, right? I mean, it's actually, by the way, they have a Friday party routine, right? Which is they actually go and it's in the office, but they do an interesting sort of event, right? They have some game. It's in the DNA. So you need a little bit of the right team and culture where you live the brand day in and day out. And I think that's actually sometimes forgotten. And it's very hard to do for larger companies, very easy to do for very small companies. As you get larger, you lose it and you make it all system and process and so on. And I think you need a little bit of both.
Got it. Sir, you mentioned the SKP report, Search
SQP,
Query
yeah.
and Performance Report.
Yeah.
Are there other sources of data that one can study and find these gaps?
Yeah, I think, the classic one that a lot of people do is the Helium 10 report, right? Which I think, again, you can get interesting things. Google, by the way, has a bunch of insights that you can look for. I think now the other thing you can do actually is, look, ChatGPT has become the best market research tool. I think most people don't use it to do very good market research, but I think with the right prompts, you can actually get, I would say a shortened version of a McKinsey study done on market sizing, right? So as I think about, for example, how we wanted to sort of go global, right? In the case of MyFitness, Middle East seemed like an interesting, it's not the most intuitive choice, right? It's not the biggest peanut butter market, etc. But the reason we sort of figured it out is it's actually growing quite fast, right? It has a large South Asian population. It basically has a price point that is quite attractive for us. There is no problem with regulations, so there's no tariffs, etc. You can sort of send it very freely and it reaches in 4 or 5 days, right? And that research, you can now do a lot through ChatGPT.
How, sir?
You can actually, by the way, you can go and query saying, what's the market size? Give me a list of the top 20 peanut consuming nations which have no regulatory issues with India. And you'll get a list. I mean, you have to validate it and all of that sometimes is hallucination. But I'm saying you can get the basic research done now very well, which allows you to actually go deeper because the base research is there, the base numbers are there, you're not wasting time on that. Instead, you're debating choices, right? You're spending more time on judgment, less time on data. And I think that's a big change that has actually happened.
So walk me through this idea and let's go deeper.
Yeah.
How to use ChatGPT to do market research?
Yeah.
One is this, which is base level research to find categories.
Yeah.
What else would you use it for?
So I think there's a bunch of things that, in Mensa that we use it for, which I think are interesting. The second thing we use it for is how do we think about feature functionality, right? And what do I mean by feature functionality, right? So if you take peanut butter, let's stick with peanut butter for a bit, right? There are many aspects of peanut butter. There is how smooth is it, how dense is it, crunchy versus crispy versus smooth, right? There is also the level of sweetness, right? There is an aftertaste, etc., right? So what you can do is you can say, by the way, can you please design a survey for me, right? That actually says what are the 5-6 parameters that actually matter for peanut butter. And you can actually get the criteria, right? So otherwise you make up the criteria, right? So it actually goes through and sort of has the institutional knowledge of all of the different things that have actually happened by large companies, right? And you're able to sort of get at that sort of survey part quite easily, right? The third, by the way, that we use it for a lot, and this is not ChatGPT, but we use agents, is basically on pricing and ads. So if you think about tech, one of the big things is we sell globally, like I was telling you earlier. And if you want to sort of sell globally, you need to be on Amazon, you need to be on Target.com, Walmart, etc. And you need to constantly optimize on ads. So you're running a whole bunch of campaigns, right? Yeah. How do you actually build an agent that can move up and down a bid, right? Based on some criteria that you give it. Either you're optimizing for revenue at a certain base CM, or you're optimizing on CM at a certain base revenue. How do you build? So we've built out agents internally that actually do ads, right? Or we built out an agent that constantly changes pricing. So, if you think about it, you have perfect volume price elasticity, right? If you look at research over the last 3-4 years of data, you can figure out what the curve is. And
can you explain this, sir? Perfect volume price elasticity.
So here is what we do. You can scrape prices. You can usually get volumes because, even in an Amazon, it says X thousand units weekly, right? You can just go in, you can get it from Helium 10. If you load all of that into a data lake, right? You have 3 years of data for not just you, but also for competitors and so on. And you sort of get a sense on, for every delta increase in price, what is the impact on volume, right? That used to be a very complicated analysis, right? You used to have, again, I keep going back to my old employer, McKinsey. McKinsey used to have teams doing pricing, right? Where you basically went through and created a curve that fit this volume price. Now you're able to do it, right? At the click of a couple of buttons. So what that allows is then basically for us to be much more scientific about pricing. So, we went through party celebrations, right? Party props. Or, we'll come to a couple of other examples. But how do you price it? Do you price it $499, $599, $699? You don't know, right? Usually, basically you start with some guess. Generally, your belief is prices can only come down, you can't go up, right? So you start high and go low. But can you be more scientific about it? Now you have the data for it, right? But very few people use it. So, these are the unsexy parts of brand building, right? Pricing, ads, inventory forecasting, demand forecasting. How much inventory should you keep for each SKU, in what node? All of these now, I think you can build a tech backbone, and that's what we have done at BrandMe. We built tech backbones for ads, pricing, consumer insighting, demand forecasting, and these go across all our brands. That's what creates the synergy, right? Because you also have lots of data, and your cost of tech is amortized over multiple brands, and therefore you can afford to build it. And I think that's a big differentiator. If you think about brand building and scale, your original conversation was first, how do you find niches? And then the second was, how do you scale, right? How do you think about 100 and 1,000? I think going to your second question of 100 and 1,000, tech is a large enabler of scale up. It's not the only enabler. I think if I think about a framework of what will it take to scale brands, right? I think technology is one. Operations is another. People and attracting the right kind of people, incentivizing them is the third. And the fourth is enabling a product development / sourcing engine that has more hits than misses. You will never have all hits, right? But how do you make sure that you have 2/3 hit, 1/3 not a hit? These are the four, and then maybe there's a fifth, which is how do you go from push to pull in a brand?
What does that mean, sir?
So most times when you think about selling a brand, how do you sell a brand in a marketplace? You put an ad on it, it shows up on top, and people click on it because the price is right and they buy it. That's classic push. Pull is when people search for your brand. So there is now, one of the things we track is across all marketplaces, how many times is MyFitness getting searched, and is it going up month on month on month on month? Party props month on month on month, villain month on month on month. How do we actually see that grow, right? And there are interesting ways to do it, right? So most people don't spend on display advertising at all. Because if you look at a near-term return on investment of advertising, if I spend 10 rupees on advertising, the maximum benefit I will get is what's called bottom of the funnel, right? And bottom of the funnel is when you've already clicked, right? You search for something, you want to sort of buy it. That will usually because your intent is already there.
Yeah.
I'm of a big belief that if you want to go from 100 crores to 1,000 crores, 25% of your marketing should be display advertising, which is increasing your brand awareness, right? Which very, very few people do.
Yeah, because it's
not immediate ROI.
counterintuitive.
It's not immediate ROI, right? But if you compound it, it's like SEO, right? Most people don't do it because there's no near-term impact. But if you take a 3-year view, 5-year view, 10-year view, it makes a massive impact. So how do you continue? The fifth point is how do you continue to do what I call frugal, low-cost marketing to increase pull? You don't have to run a large 20 crore TV campaign. I've done all of that also in the Myntra days, right? But you don't need to run very large campaigns. You can have always on marketing that actually really does this. So these 5 things I think are quite important for scale up.
Beautiful. And sir, while speaking about tech, we also discovered another niche. There is a large space for a tech company to come and solve these problems for D2C companies, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because they're aware of the problem, but they're not aware of the solution.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if they're actively thinking about a solution.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, very few people are actually thinking of how do we build agents who can scrape data and then make decisions.
Yes.
They usually have people for that.
Correct.
The moment you go down from people to tech, the cost dramatically decreases.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then a tech company can actually service multiple clients with probably the same requirements, with a few custom requirements. And that's also a huge gap, right?
I think it's a massive gap. We are starting to build some interesting tech. We haven't externalized it yet, but I think there's an opportunity to externalize it. I'll give you a simple example. Online digital first. You don't sell a product. You sell an image, right? You click on an image. It's not a real product. So, about 12 months ago, I would say 90% of our products were shot, using a photographer, usually if it was lifestyle with a model or, a setup like this, etc., right? Now, 40% or 40% or less than 40% is done through that. 60% is done through AI generated images. And there's no difference in click-through rates, right? It's much faster, time comes down. An average catalog cost, if you get a model and shoot, is about 1,200 to 1,400 rupees. If you do it through an AI generated prompt, even assuming the license fees that you pay, all of that, it's 25 rupees. It makes a dramatic difference to your unit economics, right? If you think about selling X 100 units, you've done 1/10 the cost. So going back to your point, I think, there is a big opportunity to build what I would say are purposeful, business-oriented AI solutions that can solve real problems, right? Whether it's a collections agent, right? Whether it's an ads agent, whether it's a demand forecasting agent. But the reason we are able to do it is, we're doing it to solve a real problem that we have in our group of brands, right? If you do it outside in, it becomes a little bit more theoretical in my view. So I think there's an opportunity, and I do think there's an opportunity. I think this can be the next big Shopify, right? See, I mean, if you sort of fast forward in life, I don't know how it'll play out, but one of the theories is you have agents who are personal shoppers who are owned by the consumer. You have agents who are brands, right? And they talk to one another, and that's how the transaction happens. Let's assume that happens sometime in the future, right? Which means, by the way, any middle layer sort of goes away. If you think about it like that at some level, then if you think about a Shopify-like ecosystem, you need all of these tools, right, to determine what each brand needs to do. And so can you build out an ads agent? So the way we think about it is there are many elements of brand building, right? Product development, launch price, how do you kickstart, how do you do ads, how do you do brand marketing, how do you do performance marketing? Each of these can we think of as a individual tech product or agent, is how we're thinking about it. It's very early days for us, but I think over the next year and a half, it can actually be quite interesting to see whether this itself can become a quite large business.
Yeah. That's wonderful, sir. So coming back to the gaps in the market,
Yeah.
we spoke about reading data,
Yeah.
choosing a space with less competition, and find someone passionate.
Yeah.
Now let's explore these spaces. Let's pick perfume. Now on the outset, perfume looks like a saturated category.
Yeah.
Because you've got all sorts of brands from Bella Vita all the way to Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
Do you still feel there is a gap in the market?
I do. Let me tell you why I think there's a gap in the market. So, one is of course price points. See, I think just to take one step back, perfume as a market for men is still very small, right? The largest market in India is actually the deodorant market, right? Because it's at 199 price point. So, deos are by far the largest space. As people become wealthier, people move from deos to perfumes, right? And it's also alcohol free, no gas, all of that, right? So, I think it's a better option. So, I think the fragrance market in India is just getting started. I think, by the way, there will be many players that become large. If you look at the Middle East, each of these big perfume brands are whatever, few $100 million to $1 billion, right? So, I think there's a big opportunity. Incidentally, Villain is starting to sell well in the Middle East. Again, my point is think global from day zero. There is no reason why an Indian brand cannot win in a different geography. So, so one of our goals is, can we actually launch 50 ml packs, which I think, by the way, will be a deo substitute. Can we take it to the Middle East, where you can actually start to do something interesting, right? So Villain is still small for us, but I feel like there's a big growth potential. It's also an anti-hero brand by name and definition, right? And therefore, it's an interesting niche. Now, will all brands become 1,000 crores? I don't think so. But I think there's no harm in building a 250 crore very profitable brand either, right? So I think, if you have a portfolio, we need 4 brands which are very large. For us, they are Majestic Pure, Botanic Earth, MyFitness, and the Party Celebration business.
Can you spell that out again, sir?
Majestic Pure aromatherapy, Botanic Earth value-added hair care, MyFitness, which is basically healthy snacking, and Party Props, which is Party Celebration. These are our 4 large brands, right? Now, these will still be 70-80% of my revenue, right? It doesn't mean, by the way, you can't have a tail set of brands which are profitable, well run, can be a few hundred crores and still do well, which can be a Dennis Lingo, it can be a Villain, can be whatever else, right? If you look at Unilever today, I think it's the same. You have 8, 10, 12 power brands, and then you have a large number of tail brands. And the tail brands will have their day in the sun. But if you look at management focus, attention, etc., the big thing we are doing is how do we actually take these 4, 5, 6 brands and build them into the 1,000 crore brands that we were talking about.
Understood. So, for perfumes, the gap in the market is that as people graduate from deos to perfumes, as the per capita income of India goes up, consumption of perfumes will shoot up.
Yes.
At the same time, people who are buying deos right now at 199 rupees will also buy perfumes with 50 ml packs.
Yeah.
And that will become a growing category.
Yes.
So, long story short, perfume is a growing category merely because of the trajectory of the Indian market.
I think so, and I think the other thing is as incomes increase, people look for different occasions for perfumes, right? I think what people do is, you want something to wear for work. You want to wear something in the evening for a party. There's a niche of, when you go to the gym, how do you smell good, right? I mean, so there are different need states of perfumes. I also think India is actually a relatively infant market on fragrances, right? In the sense, if you think about notes, the most, if you go from woody to fresh, right? I think there is a range of different fresh flavors that you can bring to the market, which I think haven't been done. They've been done usually in the very expensive perfume market at the very end, but you can do it at the very beginning of the market as well. So I think, to summarize, right? Apart from rising income, you can play with occasions, you can play with formats, you can play with applicators. One of the cool things is, I don't know if you've seen it, but Villain has a perfume shaped like a gun, right? It's like a little gun. I mean, the bottle is like a little gun. It's actually quite cool. I mean, people sort of love gifting it, right? So you can play with formats, you can play with fragrances, you can play with all of these to sort of create interesting niches. So product still wins, right? I mean, you need great products. You can do all the surround marketing you want, but you need terrific products.
Understood. And what was your insight with Botanic Earth, sir?
Yeah.
Because again, beauty is an extremely crowded category on the outset. And we were just discussing yesterday, I was telling Teju that soon enough, hair care will become a big category because that's the trajectory, right? We started with just moisturizers, then we went to sunscreen, vitamin C, vitamin E, then we went to the primers and concealers, and then soon enough we'll eventually graduate to hair care because skin will become crowded, but then we'll move to hair care. Like, is my thesis right?
I think so. I think hair care and value-added hair care is growing. Men are losing hair, and therefore I think anything that helps with hair growth and anything that helps with hair care, I think is becoming more popular. There is a massive trend in hair care. People are going away from, and this is a global trend, not an India trend. So Botanic Earth sells also mostly outside India, right? We do value-added hair care. So we were the first people to launch rosemary hair oil in the US, Canada, UK, Germany, right? Again, made here, but sold globally. The reason it's interesting is one of the, you go back to the tech, you're asking about how do you get scientifically insights. One of the things we picked up is actually through the scraping is people are searching more for ingredients than brands.
Okay.
Which is quite interesting. So globally, if you go to Amazon US, people are searching more for tea tree oil, batana, which is an American walnut type oil, right, etc., as opposed to saying Dove or this or that, right? So if you look at the search volumes, and you look at it over a 2-year time frame, you can see the shape go up, right? So insight number one is ingredients are becoming more important. Insight number two was, again, seems obvious now, but even 2-3 years ago, clean beauty, which is paraben-free, vegan, etc., was starting to trend more and more, right? Third is people are going for efficacy, which is you need claims. You need to say, using this 5 times can help improve hair growth by X%, right? Based on a study of some kind. So these were some of the cues that we picked up, right? Botanic Earth was primarily a shampoo and conditioning brand, right? And tea tree shampoo and tea tree conditioner were the interesting sort of bestsellers. But we started to see rosemary trend up. And therefore, we were the first ones to launch rosemary. And that's become a bestseller. It's about 15% of the market of like a global Amazon.
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's become large for us, right? So you keep looking for these trends. Now there's a new batana and castor which are starting to trend. So how can you take advantage of Indian chemists, Indian product development and Indian manufacturing, and can you sort of be at the cutting edge of what the consumer wants, is how we've sort of built this brand out, right? So the way I summarize it is nature plus science, clean beauty, hair care, right? And I think that is a massive space. Again, I would urge you, like anybody who's listening, to say, can you go global? Why don't you start as being a global brand from day zero? Why not? Right? I mean, because the mental model is you can never compete against a P&G or a Unilever or whatever, right? I don't think that's true. I think insurgent D2C brands can actually go and do really well. So that's how we started, right? So the first is, by the way, there has to be some discontinuity. The discontinuity here were people were looking for ingredient-based hair care as opposed to just brands, which gives emerging brands an opportunity to break in. So that was insight number one. Insight number two is India is a great manufacturing location to make hair care, hair oil, all of that. So we started doing that. Third big thing is, I think if you think about clean beauty and efficacy and marketing, you can actually do all of that in India and sell globally. So we put these three together and that's how we've started to really grow and scale. And this again, I feel like is a 1,000 crore brand to be waiting to be built.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. So I want to go back to your customer insights.
Yeah.
When we speak to our customers, initially we used to ask direct questions. And those direct questions never really gave us enough insights.
Yeah.
Then we conducted something called the mom test, where we asked them indirect questions and we were able to get great insights. For example, when we wanted to launch a newsletter, we asked them, would you like this newsletter? Everybody said yes. But then when I actually sent the newsletters to my customers,
Open rates were very low.
Nobody really opened it. And then we changed the questions. We asked them, when do you open emails? What kind of content do you consume?
Correct.
Where do you use this content? That's when we discovered a large cohort of UPSC aspirants
Yeah.
who want to stay abreast of happenings around the world.
So,
And they would be willing to pay for it if it is consolidated, crisp, and noteworthy. Then we discovered another cohort of customers who invest in equity markets, and they want to understand the reasoning behind what is happening in the market and why is it happening in the market and how is it going to affect their portfolio. And that's when we realized that a newsletter is not enough. A newsletter that caters to a certain pain point is important, right?
Yeah.
And then we realized that they don't want to open an email newsletter. They would rather watch a video. So it came back to our YouTube video. But when we started doing podcasts, we started talking to our customers again, and they told us that the podcast is great, but I don't remember all the insights. So again, the newsletter idea came back.
Yeah.
Can we condense everything that we discussed in the podcast, structure it very well, and send a document to our customers such that after spending 2 hours, they don't feel guilty? Because when people are watching podcasts, they're eating something,
Yeah.
they're traveling, they don't have time to take notes.
Yeah.
But because the podcast is so information dense, we have to find a way to give that information to them in such a way that it stays with them.
Yeah.
And that's how the newsletter idea was reborn again. So we realized that the best way to talk to the customers, I mean, the worst way to talk to the customers is direct
Ask
questions.
direct questions.
Would you like this product? They'll say yes, but eventually you will realize that they'll not end up paying. So my question to you is, when you conduct these customer insights, what's your methodology and what are the most counterintuitive insights that you got from this exercise?
Yeah. So, firstly, I fully agree with what you just said. I think direct questions to consumers almost yield no results. Not because I think consumers don't want to tell you the truth. It's because there is a lot of noise, right? And they sort of answer whatever comes spur of the moment. Behavior is very different from how you answer questions.
Yeah.
Right. So there are 2-3 counterintuitive things that one can do. Right. The first is, I told you about the Saturday session. We actually make consumers do stuff. Right.
Like?
I'll give you a party props example. We had this box. We thought it was beautifully designed. Right. Very nice. You know, everything is great. And we said, by the way, so we got consumers in. We told them, why don't you decorate? We have a small room in the office. We said, why don't you decorate it? And you know, one of the most interesting things that came out is they need safety pins to pin stuff, to put things together. The safety pins cost in paisa, but we never put safety pins in. So one of the things that came out was, can we add a set of 10 safety pins to every box that we send? Because it doesn't add much cost. It creates real consumer delight. So this can be only got by observing consumers. I told you earlier in this podcast about this fact about consumers basically taking a scoop of peanut butter and eating it or adding it to a protein shake and drinking it, right? This insight you would never get by asking questions. You would only get by saying, you understand, firstly, going back to your point, segment, which is one of the things we noticed is in general trade and modern trade in MyFitness, we actually have a lot of the sales happening in and around gyms. You can look at the data and you can find out. Then you sort of say, okay, there's some connection, right? So you need more. Then you go there and actually find out how are people using it. And then you find out that people are actually taking a scoop. Then you basically say, if they're taking a scoop, what can I do to make life easier? Which is, I don't want the oil separation on top. So what seems like a very easy insight is actually very, very difficult, right? The simpler the insight sounds, usually the harder it is to tease out at some level, right? You know, our peanut butter today, if you've seen the packaging, it's a blue and white packaging. It's actually not transparent, right? We're one of the few, right, who started off by having not a transparent peanut butter, but actually closed, which is not counterintuitive, right? Most people will say, I want to see the peanut butter.
Yeah.
The reason we did it actually is because when people look at it, they actually want to look at the labeling. And then if you see it in a shelf or you see it in a scroll of a mobile phone, you want something distinctive that stands out because it's selling an image. So actually the bottle looks so different from, or the jar looks so different from anything else out in the market. Now more and more people are doing it, but the jar looks so different that people actually will click on it, right? So you have two kinds of consumer insights. One is how they use the product and the second is how they buy. And both are equally important. Most times, by the way, you ask direct questions on both and don't get insights on both, or you ask only one, which is how the product's used. You also need to understand who's buying the product and how are they buying what is the process of buying. So both are quite important, and both actually, for me, the thing I would say is actually looking at people do stuff is probably the most insightful thing you can do. It is the best time investment that you can actually do, right? The second is most people don't like to Google. What I mean by that is when you get them to come and search, because then you understand how the buying process works.
How do you do that, sir?
Say, by the way, you get 10 people in, and you say, I want you to buy peanut butter, I'm going to give you some money, go through the process. Right?
This is in your office.
In my office. You'll figure out, by the way, how are they Googling? Are they going to ChatGPT? Are they directly going to Amazon, Flipkart, Zepto, Blinkit, etc.? How do they search for it? Do they search for peanut butter? Do they search for your brand? Do they search for whatever? So observe how they actually go through the buying process.
But when the customer is in your office, don't you think the customer's behavior will be influenced?
For sure, it is influenced, but it's still better than nothing. Right? In my view, I think the ideal would be to actually observe them in their natural environment. You go to the house and really spend the time. It's just very hard to do. So what we do is it's still, I mean, because it's a group of people, you still, by the way, you also understand, for example, that they actually, if there's a group of 10 people, they will almost always talk to one another and ask for recommendations. Which is interesting, right? That tells you something. Which means, by the way, again, very intuitive perhaps, but word of mouth, even among strangers, is important. Therefore, you basically say, how do I get the AI summary right in Google?
Yeah.
Right? What are the things that I can actually do for it? Or, by the way, how are my reviews and ratings? And what are the things that actually show up for the first three? Because now in an Amazon as well, with reviews and ratings, you get an AI summary. And that's actually quite important. Right? Because people don't have a lot of processing capacity. They're trying to summarize and they want to separate noise from signal, right? And that you as a brand need to separate noise from signal.
Right.
Which is also a little bit of brand building, but I would say, how do you create the single signal that goes to the consumer? So I told you health ka tasty partner. I can't tell you how many hours we debated on whether it's taste first, health first.
Okay.
Right? Do we need taste? Should it be only health? Should it only be taste? Right? And all of that, by the way, comes from a lot of introspection because the clutter in the consumer's mind is very high. The noise, I mean, everybody is trying to get your attention. How do you simplify the brand message into something that just can be in 10 seconds or less, get you into something? Making every celebration magical, clear, right? Health ka tasty partner, clear, right? It's just important to sort of simplify life, right? Your wellness partner, which is the aromatherapy brand, right? Again, how do we create the tagline that is very simple, very easy, and it also clarifies in your mind what is it that you're offering consumers?
Got it. Sir, how do you conduct focus group discussions for a brand like Botanica?
So, a great question. We actually have two things. One is we actually have panels in the US, UK, Germany, etc., which we actually pay, and they're recorded panels. So, consumer panels happen, and then we get the insights from there. We also, by the way, there use a lot more data. So, your ability to mine Amazon data, especially in the US context, is very high, or Walmart or Target. So you can actually get funnel data very easily. You can get your market share relatively very easily. You can sort of get your consumer profile actually of Amazon, which is saying what is the income level, what is the biggest cities in which they come from, what is the nature. I mean, for example, we almost have no Indians buying our brands. It's mostly Spanish and white Caucasian, right? So, you can get all sorts of insights. So you get a lot of data-based insights, and then we also do panels.
Got it. So going back to consumer business, how do you crack packaging? Should you just hire an agency like Thought Over Design to do it for you? Or should you do it by yourself? If yes, how?
So I think, again, great question. There is, so we do a lot of it ourselves, right? I think the first is, it is true design thinking, because you have to balance utility as well as beauty, right? And clutter breaking, right? The utility part of it is also misunderstood. The utility part of it is, if I have a 5 feet test and I drop the box of peanut butter, does it break or does it not break? I mean, it seems very simple, but it's not, right? Otherwise, what will happen is you can have the most beautiful packaging in the world, but if it shows up to the consumer broken, it doesn't help. So how do you get the functional part right? There is a quality which is basically, you have the Indian logistics to deal with. You know it's going to get thrown. How do you make sure that it manages? The second is, you also need to understand volume-value ratios.
Volume-value ratio.
Yeah, because all shipping and all logistics is based on volume and value, right? Which is, what is the cubic volume of it, what's the volume value? Value is what's the weight of it, the product, etc., right? So how do you optimize that so that the cost also doesn't become prohibitive? These are the, I would say, easier but functional things to get right in packaging. The real, I think, science to, or the art to packaging in my mind is, how can you make it clutter breaking? Right?
How can you make it?
Clutter breaking. Again, remember what we talked about earlier. There is signal to noise. There's a lot of noise in the world, right? You see lots of packaging in a shelf. You see lots of images when you go into Amazon. How do you make that stand out? That I think is, again, I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think it's some combination of form, functionality, color, right? Again, like I was telling you, the MyFitness jar was quite clutter breaking because both the colors and the fact that it was not transparent, right? It wasn't a glass jar. And I think it was the first of its kind, and therefore it was clutter breaking. The villain packaging that we speak about is very clean. It's black. The villain actually comes across as, there's nothing else, right? It's clean. And therefore, when you look at it, you know that it's interesting, right? So how do you get that design right? I mean, one of the recent examples I've seen is, in party props, when you open out the packaging, there's a beautiful sort of note on how do you actually put it together, right? So what is the information? Maybe there's an origin story. Maybe there is a how do you do it, if the case of gardening or like party celebrations or whatever. How do you now put in place information inside the packaging that doesn't cost more, but makes it something interesting, right? In my old, in my Myntra days, one of the things we used to do is for our top, 200,000, 100,000 customers, you send a postcard at some point of time, right? And for some of our brands, I think I forget which brand it was, but you could plant the postcard and something would grow out of it.
Oh, wow.
And because there is a seed embedded in it, you put it in the ground and then, over time you can, so that, by the way, creates memory, right? Can you have the packaging be at home and can it be utilitarian? So I think these are the 3-4 things, and I think India has an opportunity to actually do dramatically better on packaging. If you look at our average packaging, it's actually not so great, right? How can we actually get better at it? I think is, again, thinkschool, right? Can try and, I think it's an important aspect, right? Because that's the first thing that you see, the unboxing experience. I mean, look at what Apple has done.
Yeah.
And it's such a fabulous experience, right?
So I think one of the best packaging examples in India is the brand Phool.
Yeah. Done
So,
a beautiful job.
Phool agarbattis. Yeah. First of all, they look like pieces of art.
Yes.
They give you a
I
taste
think
of
so.
Kedarnath.
I think so.
Of Rishikesh.
Yes.
And when you open the packaging, there's a small ribbon-like handle which helps you open it.
Open it.
And after you open it, there's a spoon-like instrument.
Yeah.
So when you light up the dhoop, you need a place to keep it.
Yes.
And usually you can't keep it on the furniture. So there's a spoon-like instrument
where you can put it on it.
Where you can keep it. You can actually use that instrument to move around the house so that you can show the dhoop to the entire house.
Yes.
So the entire house smells very good.
Correct.
I was so mind blown and fascinated by the small thought.
By the way, and that is the core of it, right? I think what you got to is the core of it. I actually agree with you. I think Phool is just phenomenal, I think, in terms of packaging, right? And I think it's just beautiful. It's actually 2 Bangalore people, I think, no? Or where are they?
I have no idea, sir.
I think the founders are from Bangalore, I think.
If the founders of Phool are watching this, great job, guys.
I think well done.
Big
well
fan.
Done. Yeah. So, no, but I think that is the essence of thoughtful packaging, right? The fact that you actually need a place to put it, the fact that you need to show it around, right? I think that's what you have to get to, right? And I think going back and linking it, it comes from deep consumer insight.
Yeah. And I was actually speaking to a lot of these consumers, sir.
Yeah.
Because agarbatti as a category has legacy brands.
Yeah.
But what Phool did is, let's package an experience.
Yeah.
Rishikesh is an experience.
Yes.
Kedarnath is an experience.
Correct.
Now, I've never been to Kedarnath.
Yeah.
But I would like to experience Kedarnath via aroma.
Yes.
And Phool acts as an instrument to help you experience Kedarnath without going to Kedarnath.
And I think this brings a very interesting angle, right? Which is storytelling. See, I think all brands are eventually about storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think functional stories don't work. You need a hero, villain, and a plot.
Explain that, sir. Functional stories don't work.
If you basically say, I don't know, I'm making it up, right? Here is a phone, like an Apple, right? You can basically say, here is the memory it has. Here is the, technical specifications on what all the GPU can do, etc. Nobody cares. But if you basically say, I am here to make you a better photographer. I'm here for you to capture memories. I'm here for it to make a difference. I'm here to help you create, right? That, I think, appeals to an emotion. People don't buy functional products, right? I think, again, it's the same thing of the signal noise that I was telling you about, right? Human brains respond better to stories than facts, right? So it's important to tell a good story. And I think stories are what people remember. That's why podcasts work, right? Because you're telling stories, right? If you ran it like a class with a PowerPoint set of things, nobody would listen, right? The same thing applies for a brand. So how can you tell a story? We have a small brand that sells in the US called Folk Culture. It's inspired by folk tales from India, right? So we sell, hard goods, we sell pillow covers, but we bring Indian artisans to the US. Again, there's a story to tell, right? It's because folk tales from India and inspired by folk tales from India. So every brand needs a little bit of a story. If you want to really build a brand, it has to have a story. Apple has done it, Nike, just do it. It has nothing to do with a shoe, right? I mean, it's an emotion, right? It's about endurance, it's about resilience, it's about sportsmanship. You have to rise above the functionality of the brand and say, what's the story that you're trying to do, right? I can either say aromatherapy or I can say it's to make a better you and wellness in the case of Majestic Pure. I think a better you and wellness is the right answer as opposed to aromatherapy, which is a very functional view of saying I can sell you massage oils, body oils, reed diffusers, right? Nobody cares. But if I can say I can make a better you, right? You live your best life, then that story appeals. So telling stories which are clutter breaking is one of the other big things of brand building.
Got it. People don't buy what you sell, they buy why you sell it.
Yes, I think the why matters.
Understood. So now I want to talk to you about operational excellence.
Yep.
And we were speaking about tech,
Yep.
and you spoke about Vasool Raja.
Yep.
Please tell us what is Vasool Raja,
Yep.
and what must be the exact framework for a D2C entrepreneur to use tech in their business and achieve operational excellence.
Yeah. So I'll start with why it's important. The why it's important is to build a large brand in India or globally, one needs to be a cost leader. I think let's start with that, right? It is not enough to make a sexy product. It's not enough to have the beautiful packaging. You need to be a cost leader, right? Why is that important? Because even if you sell it at a premium, it allows you to put more money into marketing and branding than otherwise. So I think the first thing that founders need to get is frugality is a value, right? And if you look at Brand Me, one of our core values is frugality. Frugality doesn't mean being cheap. It means doing more with less, right? So I think that's the first mindset shift that is needed, right? If you think about operational excellence, in my mind, operational excellence is two things. The first is a technology leg, and the second is a culture leg. And both are equally important. We'll start with the technology leg because it's generally the more exciting thing, although I think the culture leg is equally important. It's a two-legged stool, so you need both to work. The technology leg is, there is a lot of hype today around AI. There is a lot of hype around generative intelligence, machine learning, all of that, right? I think the most important thing is to actually take your current business process, or actually not current business process, your current business problems, and say, what do I need to redesign this process, and how do I simplify, automate, or eliminate? Simplify, automate, or eliminate. Automate or eliminate the process, right? We spoke about this Vasool Raja as an agent, right? I mean, essentially, look, reconciliations are the bane of every D2C founder.
Can you explain, sir?
So, reconciliation is when you have a reconciliation with the platform that you're selling through, right? Let's say, by the way, you've shipped 100 units to Amazon. Amazon, by the way, says they've received only 98 units. Or, by the way, 2 of the units are damaged, right, in transit. So, you get a debit note, which means, by the way, whatever profit you thought you were going to make, you're going to make 2% less or 3% less, right? This keeps happening constantly. And if, let's say, for example, we sell 10 million things a month, right? Whatever the number is. It's a large number of units that basically get impacted across very complicated set of platforms. Then what you have to do is you have to file a reconciliation saying this did or did not happen. So, for example, if you said, I've received only 90 or 100 units, you have to give proof that you shipped 100 units and there was a proof of delivery on the other side.
To Amazon.
To Amazon, or to Flipkart, or to Myntra, or to Ajio. Everybody has a different process. Now, it's very complicated to do it because what do you need? You need some proof, which means you need a video in the warehouse that actually shipped it. You need a order management or a warehouse management system that has a digital record of where all it got scanned, what happened, etc. And then you need to put all of this together in some specific format that this person wants. Now, this is very difficult to do. So what happens? 2 things. One, most times people don't claim because you have a limited time where you can do the claim, right? Or second, if you do the claim, which large companies do, then you have an army of people doing it, right? What we said is, can we take this process and build an agent that can actually do this? Seems very easy, but very, very difficult to do. Very mundane problem, but actually it's yielding us real results, right? So that's one example of it. Another example is the ads agent, right? It's very hard to run 100,000 campaigns 24/7. Remember, a large part of our revenue, I was telling you, comes from outside India. So the time zones are all different. So we used to have people who were doing in the night, right? We had people who'd show up at 8 in the evening and stay through, which is not particularly great for anybody, right? So can you actually have an agent who can run with certain set of rules around what they need to do? So you take every element of operations in a brand, from new product launch, which is what is trending, what color, what ingredient, right? What specification is trending. 2, basically, how do I do demand forecasting, which is, how do I think about a clustering algorithm that basically says this product is most similar to product X, and therefore here is how much I should order in the first time. Or go to ads, or go to pricing, or go to supply chain and logistics planning, or to reconciliation. So you're taking the entire chain. How can I use technology to automate more and more and more of it? The reason this is important is it frees up people into thinking about improvement and decisions as opposed to gathering data or as opposed to doing a lot of grunt work to get to something. So how much more of this can we do? And I think it's been a big driver for us, right? I think we have continued to be very lean in terms of people and costs and so on, because it actually makes a big difference to actually have some of this automation layer coming, right?
Got it. So do you have any other gaps that you can speak about?
Yeah.
Where tech is needed?
Yeah, so I'll give you one more example, right, which we spoke a little bit earlier about, but we have a pricing agent, right? There are 2 parts to problems of pricing, right? The first is, how do you price when you launch a new product? And second is, as a product ages, how do you reduce the price so that the inventory goes away, right? And what is the right way to do it so that you maximize the margin, right? It seems like a simple problem, but actually, again, if you use a lot of tech, you can be much more scientific about it because you can look at history, you can look at a lot of different data. So we've built a pricing agent that basically says, how do you actually price differently and how do you actually make this happen? And I think that's actually made a big difference for us. The third is demand forecasting. So how do you actually think about what is the right inventory level to keep? Again, if you look at it, now we have multiple channels. We have quick commerce, we have e-commerce, we have D2C, we have offline. All these have different rates of sale, growth, etc. And we have, let's take, in the case of party props, we have 3,000 SKUs. So how do you demand forecast 3,000 SKUs, right? Again, I think technology can play a big, big role, right? So I'm trying to give you specific examples. One thing I wanted to tell you is, look, the most impact from operational excellence happens in boring areas, right? It's not in the sexy, always in the front end areas. So I think, which brings me to the second point. I said there are 2 pillars. One is actually technology. The second is culture. You want a culture where people are excited about cost reduction. It's very hard to build, right? And I think, how do you continue to build it? And how do you make that exciting, sexy for people? How do you create contests? How do you create a point where people have pride in the fact that they're actually making things more efficient? And I think we have tried very hard at BrandMe to sort of create that culture, right? We have something called BrandMe Star Awards. So we give out awards for people who come out with the best cost reduction idea, right? And I think some of these make a big difference, right? I mean, somebody actually came up with an idea on vacuum packing something. Somebody came up with an idea on changing from 5-ply to 3-ply, right? In terms of what the external casing is. Now, this level of detail, most people will never get into.
Yeah.
Right? Most people, actually, founders don't care. I doubt whether, I don't know, I'm making a bold statement here. I think half the D2C founders in my mind, or any founders, wouldn't know what their packaging costs yearly are. And if they did, whether it was 3-ply, 5-ply, what is the test, what is the 8-feet test. But I think those are important elements of how to run a business. And we talked about scale. Scale comes from eliminating efficiencies and running a very tight ship on things that actually should be run tightly. And then you have the resources and ability to do the marketing and the brand building and the exciting stuff. Right?
Understood. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is hiring.
Yep.
Which are the 5 to 10 most important positions that a D2C founder must hire for first and optimize for?
No, I think great question. I'm going to actually think a little bit about it. I think I want to start by answering by saying what are the characteristics, then I'll go to the roles. I think the characteristics that you need. So we're going to sort of assume this is a early stage startup just getting started, because the hiring that you do then versus hiring at a 100 crore brand are very, very different. So we should talk about both scenarios, yeah. So but when you first get started, the characteristics that one looks for are hustle. The second is learnability. A big indication of that is curiosity. And the third, which I look for, is energy. Right? Do you bring more energy to the room when you do it? Because you have to do everything, right, at that point of time. So I think those are the 3 characteristics of people. And there are ways to test each of these things when you go through an interview, right? I mean, one of my favorite things is, from a curiosity standpoint, is what is the most interesting problem you solved? And tell me a lot of detail about it. How did you learn that topic? What did you do? How did you go into some level of depth, etc.? I don't look necessarily for a lot of experience. I look for these 3 characteristics, especially when you first want to get started. The big things that you need in terms of roles. The first, of course, is product. right? You need a product/sourcing person. In the beginning, it can be the same. Over time, you can separate out design, etc., but product and sourcing. The second is a performance marketer, right? The third is a very good copywriter, right? Which I think over time now with generative AI you don't need, but imaging and copywriting and thinking about the clear messaging, which can evolve into brand. So you don't need a branding person. You need a social media copywriter type person who can actually come in, lots of hustle, can grow and grow with the role, etc., who can become your brand marketing person over time. But they clarify the message, they look for catalog images, they look for descriptions. I think these three, and then I would say either it's the founder or maybe it's a fourth person, is somebody who owns two things. One is the brand itself, which is what does the brand really stand for, what's the message, what's the purpose of the brand, etc. It should ideally be the founder. And the second is, one of these people can also do all the operating stuff, which is at some level think about supply chain planning. What do you need to do? Most of it can be outsourced. You can do it through agencies. You don't need a warehouse management system. You don't need an order management system. You don't need a warehouse. You can, you don't need a tech infrastructure. You just use AWS. But you still need somebody who's running all the back-end processes together. I would say one underrated skill is hire a recruiter early.
Hire a recruiter?
Yeah. HR. So the HR that you want to hire is a recruiter who's a talent magnet, right? So we hired a recruiter early because we were growing, we were buying businesses and brands and etc. And we needed the right talent, and I think that proved out very well for us.
So how do you hire a great recruiter?
I think the easiest is how many people have they actually recruited. Ask them what have they actually done, right? And look for not the head of HR, but a recruiter who's actually doing the real work. You go to many of these companies and you see actually there's a head of HR, there's a lot of other things, and then there's actually somebody who's in charge of talent acquisition. So you go and find out what are the kind of people that they've hired and do you like them? Or look for companies with good talent density. If you think, for example, I don't know, I'm making it up, Swiggy has a great set of people. Then you look for the talent acquisition person in Swiggy, right? And say, well, how they actually hired somebody, right? Actually, I would say, the last thing I would say is when you're starting off, hire frugally. So one of the tests that I have is, will people be willing to take a 50 to 70% haircut in cash and still come to you? And if you give them stock. Now, you may not do all of it, but I asked this question saying, if I gave you half of what you were earning, but I gave you stock, would you take it? And the answer to that is no. It tells you something. You may still hire the person, but you know what their risk appetite is, you know how wedded they are to the company, etc. So I think that's in the early stage, right? As companies and brands grow and scale, I think you're looking for slightly different things. The first is you're still looking from a characteristic standpoint, the three things I told you, hustle, learnability, and energy, those are exactly the same, right? No questions there. Now what you're looking for, however, is also somebody who has actually seen some level of scale. So what I mean by that, to take out all the jargon and all of it, how do you put in place either a process or a product when there's none, right? Without adding bureaucracy.
Problem solver.
Yeah, you problem solve it, but you problem solve it fundamentally. So let's say, by the way, you're always running out of stock. What you don't want is somebody who hustles and gets you the stock every time. What you want is somebody who says, here is the Excel that I have created for the planning, which will help with reordering and reordering frequency. Or I've created a system that gives you a ping 5 days before that says you have to raise a PO. So somebody who thinks in product and tech, right, so that you can start to say, I create a scalable process of some kind. I think it's important because with growth, a lot of things start to break down. The other person in addition to these three that you need, I think as you scale, is a CFO. You need a finance person. You need somebody who's constantly looking not at EBITDA, but at cash flow. How much money is coming in, how much money is going out. I think you need to know it daily if you're an early startup. You need to know it monthly if you're a slightly bigger startup, right? So having that system and process and somebody who can put that together is quite important.
Got it. So a product person, a performance marketer, a copywriter, a brand custodian, if that's the right word,
Yes.
an operations and supply chain person, recruiter, and CFO.
That's right.
Right? And the four attributes are hustle, learnability, energy, and problem solving.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So my last question to you is, what are the biggest mistakes that founders make and how to avoid them?
Again, great question. I've made lots of mistakes. So I'm trying to think through all the different mistakes. The first, I think, is separate out valuation and ownership. Don't get confused by valuation. Valuation is a meaningless number. Till you're a public company, valuation is meaningless. What matters is what ownership you have. So I think that's one mistake people make. I think they chase valuations as opposed to saying, I want to own a certain part of the company. I want me and my management team to own a certain part of the company, etc. I think the second is being efficient with capital. I think we have not been very efficient with capital if you look at the large success stories of, right? How do you use the least amount of capital, right? If you look at the global success stories, Microsoft, Google, all were profitable when they became public. They consumed very little capital and they built very large companies. So how do you be very, very efficient with the use of capital? One thing to remember is if you're a founder and you take equity, it's money that has to be returned. And most people expect a 25% return on IRR. Just think about it. If you were borrowing money on your house and somebody asked you for 25%, most times you wouldn't take money, right? Whereas you are taking this money now. So it's important to realize it's an obligation and you have to return it at a certain percentage IRR. So it's very hard. So the less money you take, the better off you are, right? So that's the second. The third, there are going to be lots of ups and downs. You have to enjoy the journey. You have to enjoy the day-to-day. And the easiest way to enjoy the day-to-day, in my view, is to have people that you like working with. You're going to be working long hours. You're going to be doing crazy things. At least find people that you enjoy doing it with, right? Because you're going to be spending more time with these folks than with your family in many cases. So how do you make sure that you enjoy that time? And they're good people to work with. I mean, I have a little bit, one of the things that we test, especially for senior, is culture fit, right? You know, is this a person that you can be stuck in an airport with for 6 hours? And do you like hanging out with them? Right? If the answer to that is no, right, don't hire. So I think enjoy the people and enjoy the journey would be the third, because actually external markers of success keep coming and going. You know, when you're doing well, everybody will write about you. You get invited to podcasts maybe, I don't know. Right? But when you're doing well, nobody will talk to you. And I think neither of them matters, right, at some level. What matters is, are you learning and are you having fun? And are you actually having a goal that keeps you excited? Right? And I think it's a bit, maybe it sounds a bit philosophical, but I think unless you have that mindset, you go nuts, right? Because you keep going through cycles and nobody, by the way, I can't think of a single startup here or globally that has been one straight line of increase, right? Everybody has had a pivot, everybody's had a tough time. We don't celebrate the failures and the tough times as much. And I think if there's one thing I want people to sort of know is, nobody's had it good all the time. Everybody, including me, everybody, we've all had tough times. And everybody understands that people go through tough times.
Can you tell me the most traumatic time that you've had, sir, in your entrepreneurial journey?
I would say many things, but midlife was a very tough phase, right? Because, you know, I just come off a high of being in Myntra and Flipkart and, you know, raising lots of money. You know, Walmart sale was a very large sale, everybody did well. And then I actually ended up putting a lot of my money into buying 10% of a company and I could not raise money, right? You know, this was 2018, 2019. So COVID was just happening, you know, the WeWork thing just happened, right? Where it went from 40 billion to nothing. And so I just couldn't raise money for a loss-making business. And it's like quite humbling till you go ask for money and you get 100 no's. Only then do you realize how hard this is, right? So, and we almost ran out of money. Well, not we almost, we did run out of money, but we actually managed to sort of keep cash flows going, getting some money in, getting some money out. I was every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, me, my CFO and my other co-founders would have a call on what money did we get in yesterday, what money can we pay today, right? Very stressful, very painful. But the fact is we lasted. And because we lasted, we were able to actually get an exit. So sometimes, by the way, so that was most traumatic. But the lesson I learned is actually very important. One is cash flows, right, are everything. So don't run out of cash because you can't. I mean, so the biggest thing you can do for success of your startup is to not die. Right? If you don't die, the chances of success go up infinitely, right? So I think that was the second sort of lesson learned. And the third is not to take it personally, right? I mean, you know, it took me a long time, right? Because, you know, I just felt like my entire reason for existence is saying, I mean, I've done whatever, you know, I was quite successful at McKinsey or so I thought, and then, you know, Myntra was great, and then I can't raise X, Y million, I can't raise anything, zero, right? And that actually takes a lot of effort and a lot of things out of you. And I think it's quite humbling. And I think that really, I thought, helped me prepare for Mensa and Brand Me, right? I just felt like, you know, you went in with the right mindset, saying this is going to be difficult.
That's beautiful, sir. Sir, last question. If you were to recommend 3 guests for this podcast, who would it be? People that you know.
Okay, I would say get a Kunal Shah.
Yeah, got it, sir. We already got them.
Okay, you've got a Mukesh Bansal?
No, not yet.
I think Mukesh is very thoughtful, speaks very well. Have you got, did you get Kishore Biani?
Yeah.
Oh, you have already.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think he's another, lots of insights in all the time. I would say if you can get, I mean, I think it'd be fascinating. I don't know him well, but I think I think you should try and get Deepinder.
Dipinder.
Yeah, if you haven't got him. I mean, it's been the most successful sort of IPO story. So I think it's been very interesting, and you've sort of been in the public markets. I think he'd be very good.
Got it. That is all, sir. Thank you so much for giving us your valuable time, sir. This has been a masterclass, and I just hope to see you again and again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.